All right, so today, guys, I have Andrew Warner on the show. He's
Yeah.
actually the host of Mixergy.com. I'm really excited to have Andrew on today. I actually took time off work to come interview him, and
Oh, wow. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Well, only an hour and a half. I'm going back to work after, but I took some time off. I told him, I said, at this time frame, I gotta make sure I'm available. Someone like you, I knew that I had to make. I suppose I had to really make a little bit of a sacrifice, and that's not a problem for me. It's worth it to get high quality guests on my show.
All right. Well, I'm
But
glad that you did it, and now I feel like I have double obligation to make this thing killer. All right. So I told you before we started, you should ask me the most jerky question that you can imagine, because it's probably not jerky, and if you honestly want to know the answer to it, I think we should start with that. But I shouldn't even start directing you. I can't just sit back and let you ask questions. I feel like I have to direct the questions
yeah,
that you give to me. I'm too used to
well,
being an interviewer. I've got to shut up and let you ask your questions.
well, no, I like that because I mean, even for the audience, it's a learning experience. Like you're the one who's got the 800 plus interviews under your belt. So for me to understand and think about that more, it's going to give me more of an idea of how I should be, doing my future interviews, making things interesting. But I mean, I guess to start out, I figured we could start the questions, but I wanted anyone who doesn't know who you are, maybe just give a little bit of a brief story and kind of Mixergy and how that's started for you.
Mixergy started because my software company failed. I somehow found myself running an invitation site for events. I spent about $300,000 getting it built. It didn't go anywhere. I didn't even want it to go anywhere. I don't know how I got into it. I just kept trying to. I guess I started out building something small, and then I said, well, I have to make this work. So I spent more money and more money. And anyway, by the end, I just had to say, this thing failed. And I said it in a video. I failed. I'm going to close that up, and what I'm going to start to focus my life on is interviewing entrepreneurs about how they built their businesses so I can learn directly from them, so that I can never make that stupid mistake again, or at least reduce my odds of doing it. And I said I'm going to publish it all publicly, because otherwise I don't think I'll get the level of guests that I want, and so that other people can learn along with me. And that's where we were. That's about 5 years ago, and since then I've done over 800 interviews.
Wow. So I guess for the questions, I figure I'll just shoot off the top of my head because there's stuff that's kind of like I'm
Yeah.
thinking as we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to do it all over again, to start from scratch, what would you change? Like, what would be some things that you might do differently, just going back and doing it over now that you've done over 800 interviews?
You know what? I should have respected my interview process more. There's so much of my beliefs about how to do interviews, the power of talking to people and asking questions, that I didn't talk about publicly. I didn't show people what I was trying to do because I didn't see it as important enough. I thought, I'm just an interviewer. No one wants to hear from me. I'm just interviewing, trying to learn. No one cares what I have to say until I've learned it all. When instead I should have stepped out and said, here's one of the core beliefs that I have, and I think the rest of the world needs to consider it. For example, I don't believe that you should, just because you have a blog, act like a know-it-all. And most people at the time said you have to have a sharp opinion. They still say that if you have a blog, you have to have a sharp opinion. You have to pick fights with people. And that's the commonly accepted belief about how to publish online. I had an alternative belief, which is quit acting like the know-it-all and instead be the curious. Be someone, the curious about it all person. And I should have stepped up and said that this is my belief and people need to at least hear it. I should have told my audience more about my way of doing interviews, about all the work that goes into the interviews so that they value it more. One of the things that I've learned having done all these interviews is that it's not enough to just do right. You also have to tell people what you're doing for them so that they could respect the process, so that they could enjoy the finished product more. I did an interview with one of the founders of Honest Tea. And if you look at the back of his label, you'll see his story. If you peel the label off with a bottle of tea, you'll read the story. You'll read why his tea is different from other teas, about the ingredients, about the process, and so on. They use real tea leaves instead of powders. They filter differently. They don't use heavy sugars the way other people do, and so on. And if you peel the label off, you'll read that. And he said, by talking about our story, we reinforce this message and we build this community of people around what we're trying to do. And I said, should we be doing that too? And he said, of course. And I realized that's a stupid question for me to have asked. Of course I should be doing it. I should be telling my audience about the work that goes into my interviews, about how I don't just allow anyone on, but I do research to make sure that I get the right guest, because there are a lot of people who pretend that they have business success, and I don't want them on, and I don't want to treat them like they know everything. I want people who genuinely have built successful businesses. When I have them on, I do heavy research on them so that my audience isn't subjected to questions that don't go anywhere, but they end up getting questions that will change their lives. So stuff like that I should have said, but I didn't own what I did. I didn't feel proud of it. I thought that this was a means to an end instead of seeing that this is part of my contribution to the world.
Right, right.
And how many people who are listening to us are thinking the same way? Maybe they're starting a business and they're thinking, until I make it, no one should hear from me. Until I made it, I can't tell my employees or my outsourcers what to do, because what do I know? I can't, stand up for anything until I've got it all. It's a mistake I made. I hope I can help other people avoid it.
Yeah, no, I think that's great information and something that I'll have to definitely take into account. Now, obviously, for me, this, like I mentioned before we started, this will be my 24th interview. So, I mean, there's plenty of road ahead, And
it's 24 more interviews that most people have the guts to do. Most people don't even have the guts to ask someone for an interview, let alone to get on and do the interview and ask the questions that matter to them. Yeah,
yeah. No, and I think that's good too. I mean, I guess while sort of on the topic, when it comes to reaching out to people, I've heard you say in at least one of your interviews where you mentioned there were people you reached out to and they may have, said no, or I would assume they probably just didn't reply whatsoever.
Yep.
Which is something I'm becoming accustomed to. I just have a list and I keep very basic information. I have noticed that even a follow-up with like a Twitter, like tweet, like sending them a message on Twitter is actually enough to say, like, 2 people have said, well, they didn't even get my email. They didn't even know that they got it in the first place. And I had to resend it and then get that going. I mean, do you find that, following up with people is pretty common when it comes to reaching out to people that you really want to have on the show?
Yeah. Sometimes people just want to see if you're serious, and they have their own test to see if you're serious. And one aspect of their test is to not reply, to see if, is this person even going to stick around? Or is he someone who is a dilettante, who has an idea that he's going to do an interview show, and he does one episode and then he disappears and then the whole site goes down, and they don't want to be associated with that. So sometimes they just do a test. They don't respond to the first one to see, do you really want them? Or they respond and they say, check back with me a month later to see if you'll still be around and remember to check back in. And even if it's not a test, whether they know it or not, if it's not an intentional test, it's kind of a test. They are trying to see, is the person who's asking me for anything, is he worth working with? Is he someone who's going to follow up? Is he someone who is paying attention to the fact that I didn't respond? Those things go a long way when you follow up, when you respond, when you check in with them. I don't do it excessively, because I know that in some people's lives a Mixergy interview is just not the right fit at the moment, because I do ask some probing questions, because I do ask questions that entrepreneurs at the startup phase should not answer. But I don't push, and I often know that they will come back in the future, or we'll come back to them.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's good. One of the other things I was thinking about, and I kind of wanted to touch upon, was I know you've kind of created your interview show as the profit model you have, as far as I know, is mostly through a membership site.
Yep. Majority of the revenue comes from membership. Small minority comes from advertising. I only keep the advertising in there to get a little bit of revenue diversification for the site, but small.
Right. Now, if you were to do something different, would you, say you did not have a membership site at all, what would be some ideas you've thought about in ways that you might monetize the show?
It's an interesting question. I think it's all over the place. There's so many opportunities to monetize when you do something like this. It could be selling services to the people you interview. I've seen that happen. So let's suppose that I cared about, I'll pick something out of the air. I care about copywriting. What I could do is do an interview with entrepreneurs about how they've copyrighted, or marketing departments about their copywriting. And then because I am now associated with all these copywriters, and because I get to talk to so many people who I've interviewed, I look like the expert, and I get to have direct access to the people who want to
Yep.
hire the expert. So that kind of model works for a lot of people. Another model that works is the opportunity to do business with those companies. It's a really good biz dev tool to do interviews with people who you'd like to work with.
Yeah.
Trying to think of other models. Oh, the conference model is a big one, or the here's another one that's big. The mastermind model. I've seen some people charge $1,000+ to be part of a mastermind, and there are tons of models. For me,
Right.
I had to pick the one that I felt most excited about, and for me, it's not charging high prices so that I can get a big audience because I like having a lot of people in there, and keeping that part simple so that I don't have to sweat it, keeping it consistent so I could depend on it and have people and pay people on the team based on that.
Cool. Yeah, that was something I was curious about because I know, I guess in this space and the people that I follow, that seems to be having the membership site is somewhat unique, where it seems like a lot of other folks are doing like the mastermind group models, or they've got sponsorship, or they're also doing product creation. They're creating their own products based on what they've learned.
Product creation is terrific. I don't want to put it down. I like the idea of selling something for $1,000 instead of what I sell, which is $25 products.
Right.
And in my model, people get a lot. Everything I do, I feel like I have to give to the premium members. Where if you're creating a product, you've sold it to your people, and then you create another product, and you get to go back to the same people and resell it to them. Sell the new product to the old people and to new people. There's a lot to be said for it. I decided that what I wanted was a broad audience. So I lowered my price, and I wanted consistent revenue, so I made it into a membership.
Cool. Now, in terms of, I guess, the volume or the amount of interview shows that you do, there's two particular people I follow, and I'll mention them because, I mean, they'd love to hear a shout out. But the two people I follow that I know do interview shows every single day are John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire and Mike from Maine, Mike Thomas. I don't know if you're familiar with his blog,
Yep.
but both of those guys, they do interviews every single day. Is that a model that, you feel is a good model? Or is that something like, where would you kind of view that, being that you've done 800 interviews? I mean, you've basically done double what these guys have done.
There was a period there where I was doing interviews every single day. I mean, when I was in Argentina living there, every single day an interview was coming out. When I flew to move myself from living in Argentina to back in the U.S., the day that I was on the 17-hour or whatever hour flight, there was an interview going up, and the next day there was one. The day that soon after I landed in Argentina, when I moved there, I had an interview scheduled before I even knew where my office would be. I was that consistent about it, and it was important for me because I wanted to learn how to be a better interviewer, and I didn't want to learn something today from screwing up in an interview or missing an opportunity or learning something and then have to wait a week to try what I just learned, because then I'll forget it. I wanted to be able to do it day after day after day. The only reason that I cut back from 5 interviews a week, one every single weekday, to now 3 interviews in one course every week, which is 4. So the only reason I cut back by one program is my team got big and needed my support. And I found myself being so into doing the interviews that I robbed my team of time to work with me. And after a lot of persuasion by people on the team and people outside who I've interviewed, I said, all right, I will do 2 things. I'll batch my interviews, so I record them now every Tuesday and Wednesday, and I will cut back a little bit. And that helped. And so, for example, today all I did was talk to people on the team about how we work together. In fact, all I did, and pretty much all I did, and what I'll do after this call is talk to people on the team. I talked to our producer earlier today about how we pre-interview guests. I have a call with Alex, who books the guests later today.
Yeah.
I'll talk to him about who we should get on, how we can work with them. Sachit Gupta, who I brought on to help systemize the company better. He and I are going to have a conversation later today about how we systemize. I couldn't keep up with that team and with my customers if I was doing interviews every day.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work. I think I listened to an interview that Pat Flynn actually interviewed John Lee Dumas recently, and I listened to the podcast, and he talked about how, I think it's like Tuesdays, he literally just does all of his interviews for the entire week all in one day. And that's how he does it. And then he does, like, he's basically got a team. He probably spending a lot of that time throughout the rest of the week. And I can only imagine, I mean, for me, I'm in a scenario where I still am working a regular 9-to-5 job, and I have a girlfriend, so I'm trying to make time to, keep everybody happy, make sure I'm getting my work done, and able to still, my goal right now was doing 2 a week, or at very, very least 1.
I think that's fine. I also would suggest that you don't have to do the interview via video like you and I are doing right now.
Right.
That there are other ways to do it, and what I would look for is a way that is that you can do consistently over the perfect way. Because frankly, there are problems with the video format. I started out doing video interviews. Other people learned from the model and started doing the same thing. But they should. I don't want people to think that this is the only way to do it. Frankly, one of the problems with video interviews is that it takes a lot of work to edit. It takes a lot of work to produce. The other problem is it takes a lot of work to consume. People have to give us half an hour to an hour to listen to the whole program. That's a big ask from both the guest and from the audience. And another format to do it in is to say, I'm going to ask 3 questions of every guest, and I'll keep it consistent. It'll be text. I'll email it to them, and I'll ask them to type it out and email me back. Or I'll call them up, and I'll ask them to type it out, and I'll type it up for them, and I'll publish it. There are other formats to do it. My suggestion is to find something that you can do consistently, because inconsistency is where you get to really learn and where you get to keep improving.
Right.
You want to do something that you can do, see where you've screwed up or where you missed an opportunity or what you could have done better, and then make that correction quickly.
Right. I mean, this is kind of, for me, I guess I don't want to talk too much about myself, but just as the whole consistency factor, I mean, I basically spent the last year jumping around with the whole shiny object syndrome, which is very popular in the online space, because even, regardless of the type of people you connect with, everybody's got something different that seems to be working for them, and everyone has different methods. And I've jumped around from thing to thing, and I think I was listening to a webinar one day and just something popped in my head, and that's where this idea came on, is I could sort of do that and be really interested in what everyone's doing and make something of that. Mm-hmm. And so far it's been more consistent for me, and I see that there's a model in it because people like you and some of the people I follow, like David Siteman Garland or Mike Thomas or John Lee Dumas, like these models are working for them. So I know it's something good and I should keep going with it.
But let's look at what works about it so that we don't reproduce the whole thing and so that we don't carbon copy the whole thing. But we pick out the key parts and then we make them our own. What works is you have someone else's opinion, someone else's point of view on, so you don't have to keep coming up with your own ideas every single day. You see the people who do that. They end up coming up with BS opinions just to have an opinion that day.
Yep.
The other thing is talking to someone else is good for promotion. I interview the founder of Honest Tea, and people who are into Honest Tea, who believe in their worldview, who are followers of that business or are curious about that business, come to my site to see that interview. Then they discover my site and they stick around and watch the other programs. So it's interviewing someone else or getting other people's point of view on. That's helpful. The other thing that's helpful is learning from them, right? So we're not just doing a show to do a show, the way people in pop culture do it. We're doing it to learn, to grow ourselves. So even if no one else is in the audience, we learn and we grow from it. So there are other formats to do that in. And it could be more intense than this. Maybe it could be going into someone's office and doing some video around the office and then sitting down for an interview. It could be less intense. Like I suggested, maybe it's just text. But the key points are we want to learn from other people and expose their ideas to our audience.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, something else in this literally just popped up in my head, and I could be wrong, but I went through a course that David Siteman Garland put together for interviews, and it's a great course. And I believe he talks about in the course, when it comes to the time, you're done with an interview, you reach out to the person and say, hey, I just posted my interview. I believe he does not ask any of the people he interviews to share the actual interview with their followers. But I believe I read somewhere, I don't know if it was in his course or not, but I think he stated that you actually will ask the people to share the interviews.
Absolutely. And you know what? The way that he does it is he says, hey, I'm pumped that I did this interview with you. Here's the link in case you want to tweet it or something like that. To me, he's asking for it, but indirectly. He's hinting at it, but indirectly. And when I move through my day very quickly, if you don't make a direct request, I don't know what you're asking. I don't know what you want. What I've found in life is that it's much better to be clear and say, here is what I would like. You can say no. I'm not forcing you. I'm not putting a gun to your head. But I'm saying what I would like is some help promoting this. And I think your audience or your followers are going to want to know that you are on Mixergy. But I want you to know what I want, and hopefully explain to you why it's a good thing for you to do. It's my point of view. I think that that's the right way for me to be. I'm not going to say that other people should do it. What I will say is that when others have hinted at me, they've done an interview with me, and then they've said things like, I think your audience would love to see this. I don't always process that what they want is for me to tweet. And maybe they don't need me to tweet it. Maybe maybe they have a thing where it's a paid site and I can't tweet it. Maybe I have no idea what's going on in their heads. So I just move on. I think, great. Yeah, my audience would like to see it. Thanks for promoting it to my audience. You and I have a similar audience. Go do it. It's fine. Post it on my Facebook page or do whatever it is that you want. I need you to be clear. And it's not just it's not just my belief about how I should be with guests and how I think other interviewers should be with me. It's my belief for everything in life. I don't want to be afraid to ask for what I want. I don't want to hint at it and hope that you pick it up. I want you to be clear. This is what I would like. Right? And think about when you asked me to do this interview. You said, Andrew, can I interview you? I said to you, here is when I'm available, and I sent you a link. I want to be clear, super clear. Can you come back to me and say, Andrew, I can't work with these dates? Yeah, maybe I can do it, maybe I can't. But it's so much better when I'm clear with you and I say, these are the dates I'm available, than if I say, yeah, when, I don't know, maybe I can. Sure, it'd be great.
Yeah,
boom,
I get that a lot too. Yeah. So, and something else I figured we could bring up is, this probably would be a whole other topic, but on par with just sort of the thought process of, going in and being more direct with people and maybe not being afraid. I myself, I know for me, it might be tough for a lot of people to maybe reach out to someone of your standards where you are with your interview show and everything to even say, well, I would like to have Andrew on. They might be afraid. For me, I've done about 20 episodes, and I've had a few people on that I know are doing really well. So to me, I kind of just have looked at everyone as similar. But, have you ever felt afraid to reach out to people or, worried like, oh, well, this person might not reply to me,
I don't worry so much that they might not reply. I worry that they will reply sometimes. Because I think I don't know their business as well as my audience does. I don't know their story as well as the people who I admire do. And the people who I admire who know their story better might be listening in or reading the transcript and thinking, oh, this Andrew totally doesn't get it. That starts to mess with my head a lot. But there are a few things that have helped me get past it. One is this thing's a conveyor belt, my business. I don't have time to worry about that and to stop the conveyor. The conveyor belt's coming. The interview is coming. Yeah. It's on the calendar. I can't do anything about it. I just have to man up and get ready and do the interview. The other thing is, having done it so much, I know that I have this worry, and for the most part, the day of the interview, it just goes away. Or after the interview, I forget that I even had the worry. So I've learned that this is just part of the process. There are lots of little things like that I do that keep me from getting in my head about it. Like, what else? If I were going to be a telemarketer, for example, I wouldn't want to have a list of people to call and have to dial it, because I know that if I had a setback or if I got in my head or got tired, I wouldn't make the next call as quickly. I wouldn't punch it into my phone. I would want instead a system where as soon as I hang up my phone, immediately it dials up and connects me to the next person. Immediately. Right. So that there's no time to think, can I do this or not? And I think in life, as much as possible, I want that kind of setup. I want to create conveyor belts for myself.
I think that's cool because it just sort of goes on, and I don't know how much you want to talk about this topic. I know we talked about it a little bit before we started, but the whole countermind thoughts. And, I found I'm one of those people that when it comes to just about anything, growing up as a young kid, when it comes to, say, approaching girls and taking too much time to really think about something instead of just taking action on it.
Yeah.
And not being afraid to go ahead and do it, and having those thoughts of like, well, what if this happens? Making excuses in your head as to why you can't do something.
I've had that too, especially around talking to girls when I was growing up. It's
Yeah.
so painful. But frankly, it happened to me with everyone. I was too afraid to talk to the people who I admired, and I didn't accept that it was a fear of talking to them. I thought instead, look at those jerks. They're off in their own little A-list world, and they don't care about me. They think I'm just a D-list player in this business world. That's the way that's what I thought was going on, but what if I really spent some time examining my head, what I'd realized was going on was I just didn't know how to talk to them. I was worried that they wouldn't want to talk to me, that I would be less important for them than the people who they want to talk to.
Right.
And I didn't confront it. I didn't stop and think, why am I not talking to them? I just somehow had this floating belief that that's what was going on, that they thought they were too good for me and they would never talk to me, and screw them, I don't care about them anyway. But I think we need to stop and ask ourselves, what are we really afraid is going on? And then we need to deal with it. We need to question it. What are we afraid is going on? Well, when it came to dating girls, what I was afraid would go on is I thought my friends thought of me as someone who could make things happen, who was clearly a successful person. And if my friends saw that I was going to go talk to a girl and it didn't work out, then they would lose this belief that I could make things happen, that I was the one kid in the class who was going to go somewhere for sure.
Right.
And so that's one of the issues that I had. I had to deal with. I should have just stopped and recognized it. And then I should have stopped and recognized all those other thoughts that I had around it. And if I would have recognized it, some of those thoughts would have seemed silly. All of them would have lost their power over me. The next thing I would do is I would question it. Do I really care if Steve from high school thinks that I'm going somewhere in life? No. Is Steve even going to lose respect for me if I get shot down, or is he going to be in awe that I actually tried? Probably he's going to be in awe that I tried, even if I get shot down. No, I have to really sit and question these thoughts. Just because these thoughts, I call them countermind thoughts because they just counter me. Everything I want to do that's meaningful, these thoughts just try to sabotage, counter it.
Yep.
And so if I question them, they lose their power. And then the next thing I would do is for anything is say, what do I really want? Because I'm so brought down by this feeling of what if they don't talk to me when I go to a networking event? Or this was an issue when I was growing up. What if I make a phone call to try to make a sale and they don't buy from me? I'm so consistently thinking about that I don't stop and say, what do I want to have happen? Oh, I would like to at least have this girl, I would like to at least ask this girl out. Not necessarily even have her go out with me, not have her go to bed with me, but at least have the guts to ask her out. That would be a good accomplishment for me. Or when it comes to sales, I would like to close this sale and be able to bring in money into my business dependably.
Yep.
If I would have stopped and thought about these things that I wanted, I'd have gotten excited about taking action instead of, feeling like I can't take action because all the countermind thoughts were going in my head. So I would just sit and I would write it out. I keep a journal. I would have kept a journal with this list in it so that I could be excited about what I want to have happen in life, what I know I can do in life. And then I would have found a way to, I wish I would have found a way to spend more time thinking about those positive things, those things that I want, instead of those things that I don't want to have happen.
Right. Right. Now, something else I thought would make for a slightly interesting topic would be, I know I've seen, off the top of my head, I can't think of what they are, but I've seen you'll typically see when people create products and courses in general, you'll see that they always like to throw in the bonuses of like, I did a conversation with this person and that's included in the course. And that's just a caveat of something that is additional that they can sell their product. They can use that to sell their product. I know I've seen you in some courses where, you're featured as like one of those, here's an additional bonus where I have a conversation with Andrew Warner for, on this topic. Is that something that you find that people are approaching you often to be included in something that they're releasing or launching or they're working on? They want you to, participate, bring your knowledge to the table.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do it as often as they want me to do it. I think Neil Patel asked for that first, and then other people did too. And I'm always happy to do it, except when the person is not giving anything back. When it's one of these taker situations where all they want is to say that they are the experts, and and how do I explain what it is? Well, I guess anything where there's not giving anything back, you have to. I don't want money for it. I want to give
Yeah.
it for free. I just want to feel like they respect the work that I've done. They respect the legacy that I've been building here by doing interviews and setting them up with it. And that's it. And if they're happy with that, great. But if they are now suddenly the experts who are going to, in the interview, even teach me how I should be doing interviews and so on, it's like, what's the point of having me on?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of wanted to tie this question back into the last discussion on the countermind thought. And, I've been thinking to myself about, back on even further into the interview as we've talked about monetization and ways to monetize. And, what it seems is that, I noticed Mike Thomas of Mike from Maine, he basically interviews people who create products, and that's obviously very, very popular.
Yeah,
so I've thought to myself, what would I do if I were to create a product? And I've thought to myself, if I get to a point, when will I ever be, or can I get to a point where I could reach out to people like you and create something that's super awesome, really powerful, and give back to all those people, the people that are doing really well in the online marketing space, and, actually deliver something that's just going to blow people away. And I guess I've thought about that and how I could formulate that. I mean, is that something I guess you've maybe had some experience with?
I've seen people do it with me. I think it's a natural thing to do. I think you should absolutely do it. And what you're immediately going to think is, how do I give these guys money? And the money you're going to make is not enough for me to come on. It's almost like you asking me to help you move, and I say yes. But
Right.
if you say, and I'll give you $25, suddenly I'll say no. You're much better off saying to people what Neil Patel said with me, which is, I respect the work that you've done as an interviewer, and I respect the business that you built before Mixergy. I want to learn from you as much as possible, and I want my audience to learn from you. Will you let me interview you and give it to my paying customers? I think, yeah, absolutely. Take the interview, and I hope that your audience gets to learn a lot from it.
Right. And then he used that in a course that he put
I'm
together.
looking to see if he still did it. This is years ago when he first started selling his product. I bet it's still in there, but let's see.
Yeah, I know he's got a few that he
There it is.
promotes.
Session 1, bonus material, Andrew Warner. And the reason you want to do that is I used to think that it was just about sales, that it was just because what you want to do is use these people's names to increase your sales. But what I found is that the audience for educational products does want case studies, does want to see how other people are using what they're learning. And when I think back, when I did Toastmasters to learn how to speak in public, I bought this CD collection from a guy named Darren LaCroix. He had this great collection teaching you how to give Toastmasters type speeches so that you can win at the Toastmaster competitions, but also go on and give paid professional speaking, do professional speaking. And he had these case studies that I loved. I used to ride my bike and listen to them because I wanted to hear how other speakers prepared, what they did to know their audience and to deliver for the person who hires them, and all those things. They were really interesting to me. So I understand now.
Yeah. Now, I guess kind of related on the same topic. I mean, obviously you've got you've got your membership site. Those people that you've had on that are including a lot of the content that you're doing in those, I guess you're really calling them courses. I mean, how are you kind of approaching it the same way where you're just giving them something of value, or are they really a lot of those folks really looking for money?
Not one of them has asked for money or received it. And I've done this long enough now and been so open about my mission that people support the mission and want to help out. And that's where it comes from. It's me saying this is what I'm trying to do here, and me being open about my process and them buying into it. And some of them are doing it just because I have a big paying audience, but most of them, I believe, do it because they believe in the mission. And a great example of that was when I was starting out. I'm trying to think of, there's so many different examples of people who, actually, here's the first thing that I did. I went to the audience and I said, I want to sell you something. I want to generate revenue with Mixergy, but I'm not sure what to sell. And so every Tuesday, I'm going to try selling you something different. If you like it, buy. If you don't, fine. But I'm going to learn along the way what to create.
Right.
And one guy in my audience said, please never mention my name, but I want to support you and show you that this can really happen. I'll do a Skype call with you and I'll teach you a little bit. And he personally took me through his PayPal registers and showed me the revenue. He said, you're not going to believe that there's money in this. I want you to see that there is so that you have confidence in those days when you're second-guessing yourself. And then he said, here are a few things that I learned. And he just showed that to me. There was no upside for him. I can't even mention his name, so he's not doing it to get any credit. He just wanted to help out. And there are many other people who said, I will help teach a course, including the founder of Visual Website Optimizer, who said, I'll be your first, I think it was the first one. And he wrote the course himself. Today I help people create their courses, but he wrote it himself and he taught my audience. And back then I was charging for those things individually, and I got to keep 100% of the revenue.
Wow.
Now, did he do it because he wanted to promote Visual Website Optimizer to his audience, to my audience? Maybe, but I don't think that there's enough in that. I think what he was is a friend and supporter who knew Mixergy before he started his business, and I'm grateful to him for doing it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's awesome. And that's kind of what I've found too. You know, I found a guy in a Skype group, and he was one of the recent interviewees that I had on the show. And he spent, you know, probably in total about 3 hours just on Skype through various sessions, just chatting. And, you know, he one day was like, well, let me take a look at your landing page. And he was giving me tips, and he showed me something on YouTube I had no clue about. And it just that kind of stuff that really sets, you know, people like him really apart. Whereas, you know, I may have had to pay someone, you know, upwards of hundreds of dollars to do something like that, where they would just take that time.
Being public is huge. Just keep talking. There's a lot of risk to it, or at least we think that there is. What if I say something stupid? What if people judge me? The risk is nothing compared to the upside of people like that helping you. What's your URL?
For my site, it's voicesofmarketing.com.
I had it on my other computer, and I don't have it here. I'm looking right now. One of the things that I wanted to suggest to you is that you should sell more on your site, even if you don't know what to sell yet.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of, and that's something that why I brought up a lot of the monetization kind of discussion was, you know, what do I really want to do? And right now, I haven't made a dime with my interview show yet, but it hasn't really stopped me because I know that I'm watching the people like you and Pat Flynn and Mike Thomas and John Lee Dumas and David Siteman Garland, you know, just seeing all these people, and they're doing really, really well with this model. And I like the idea of every time, you know, I got to a point with just general blogging where I was sort of like in a rut with what do I want to write about, or I don't have enough knowledge about these topics to really make a good piece of content, even though I love writing. But with this, I can bring people on that are doing things and they're having success with different ventures, and then let them share with the world. And that's, you know, obviously you've been able to do that like tenfold.
Let's go back to charging. I would suggest that just like you have a home, contact, and about link at the top of your site, I'd suggest that you put something up there that sells. A link maybe that says, at the very least, one that says sponsor. And on that page, have a little bit of text, but basically an email box that says, add your email address and I'll send you my rate card. People will put their email address in just out of curiosity about your prices. And then you can at least have a list of people who are interested in advertising. So at least, at the very least, put that at the top. Not just you, but anyone who's doing an interview. I had to take mine down because I was getting so many requests for sponsorships and I didn't want to be distracted by it. So put that on, and I think you'll be impressed.
That's a good idea.
The second thing I would suggest is that you find one other thing to sell that is more for your audience, that your audience would buy, not that other people would buy to reach your audience. And I don't know what that is, but I'd say, dude, start just playing around with it.
Yeah.
So one thing that you could do is you can say consulting. Have a link that says hire me for consulting, and then don't even tell them what they could hire you for at first. Just let them offer to pay you. And the reason that you want to do that is you want to see what are people interested in. What are they so interested in that they want to actually pay for? My wife and I, for her personal site, for her professional personal site, we spent a couple of hours on a Sunday once just adding some PayPal buttons. It's so easy.
Yeah.
And people for months, years afterwards, started hiring her. It's not asking anymore. It's just plugging in
How to do it.
and paying. And it's so cool when people start paying you, when they hit that PayPal button. So that's one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is you can say, a lot of times people for road trips want all the podcasts, all the MP3s in one place, and there's some people who are willing to pay for that. Put that up, but find something. I want to see you charge on the site before you're ready, before people are going to pay you, because you want to make the statement to yourself and to them that this is a real thing. It's a real business. It's not just a side hobby. You're not just playing with model trains. You are doing something that's going to help them in their business in a way that's going to be so helpful that they would pay for it. Get them trained to see that you're charging. Get them trained to see that you value yourself and you value your time and you value the work that you do. Put that on there. You can always sell something else later. You can always sell something better later. But
Yeah,
now
no,
you just want to
I
get
think that's an
started.
awesome idea. I think that's awesome. Yeah, I'll set that up by this weekend, and I'll send you a link when it's done. And see what
And
you
here's the
think.
other thing I would suggest. Put Mixergy higher on your list of recommended podcasts at the very top.
Yeah.
I am the originator of all these interviews.
Yeah, no, I actually was going to change that entire page and fix it, and I don't know what I did with it, but maybe it's not displaying for me. But I had a widget that was like on iTunes, and you could scroll through and see, and it was easier to connect in with all of them. But yeah, that wasn't in any particular order. I just threw that all
Frankly,
together.
I'm not even sure that you need it, except maybe to build relationships with these other people. But I don't think that you need such a big recommended podcast list at the top right now. I think you're ready to move past it.
Yeah, that was sort of just an idea, a filler, I guess.
It's
something.
a good filler it's also good for, don't even kill the page, just kill the link to it. It's a good way of showing people like Pat Flynn, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. I'm a supporter of yours, so that if you ever want to talk to them, you've got that
Exactly.
You're showing that you care enough about them to link and to talk publicly about them. But at this point, I think you're ready to just focus on your own.
Yeah, move past that.
I think so.
No, I think that's good advice. I mean, I guess really at the moment it's kind of, I've thought more about in terms of the promotion and obviously the discussion of how often I do these podcasts is what types of promotional strategies can I start focusing on to bring more people to the show. Because right now, I'm not getting most interviews I post. I'm not getting a lot of comments, and the downloads are pretty sparing. But it's starting to grow. I interviewed a guy who has 50,000 people in his Google circles, and he shared that, and I'm seeing constant referral traffic. So it's like,
frankly, if you want traffic, the best way to get it for interview programs is to interview people who have big followings like that.
Yeah. There's another fellow who his interview is going up this Sunday, and I believe that he actually stated right in the interview, it sounded like he might share that with his email list because he's not someone who gets interviewed all that often. I think he stated somewhere in his blog he's been interviewed maybe once or twice, prior to me, and he's doing really well. He was featured on like Pro Blogger, so he's someone he's actually doing really well in the the blogging sphere. But how are you doing for time, Andrew? I know.
I'm starting to get a little concerned about it. Do you want to go a couple more minutes and then I'll head out?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm trying to think of anything in particular that I wanted to ask. I was trying to keep things at least somewhat interesting. I know this sort of came up before we started, and I thought it'd be interesting and different to bring up. Is I'm assuming you've had a lot of people reach out to you. You're on their show, just like today I'm here interviewing you. Do you find that if you ever go back and look at some of these people, do you find that they've sort of just disappeared off the face of the earth? That they'd stop what they're doing, maybe they just didn't feel that it was the model was good enough. And
yeah, totally. They I think it's tough to keep anything up. How many of us forget blogging, forget interviewing, those are really tough. How many of us have started journals, diaries, and quit on that? Where we're just writing for ourselves, so there's no question that the rest of the world is going to judge us. There's no reason to have to ask someone to be a guest on. It's just us writing for ourselves, and we can't keep that up. I get it. I wish that more people would keep going, and I think that there are ways to keep going, but I also don't want to be hard on someone who tried and decided to move on. You shouldn't do everything that you started. Sometimes it's better to try and then realize that it's not right, it's not for you. But I would suggest that anything that you want to keep doing on a regular basis, that you set up some external mechanisms to keep you going. So we talked about, for me, one of my external mechanisms is no matter how nervous I am about doing interviews, I have another one on the calendar coming up at any point in my life. I don't think since I started Mixergy that I didn't have someone on the calendar. There's always someone in the future on the calendar. So that's one external mechanism that you can put together. But find those external mechanisms so that when you're not feeling it, you still produce. When you don't feel like you have to do it, there's still something out there that compels you to do it. Makes you remember you want to do this, you have to do it.
Yeah. I like the idea of the calendar because that's something like for me, I know right now I have an interview that's, not for another week and a half. And that to me, it's giving me that much more time to just fill the rest of the month and keep going with it and stick to a goal of doing one a week, which really is not unreasonable whatsoever,
Yep.
So, yeah, I really like that advice. And that was something I was curious about, because
I do be external. Don't have it be some artificial internal thing like where you schedule a blog post and it'll be empty unless you write something in it. Nah, if you really get lazy, if you really get insecure, you're going to change it. So I would have it be external. On the internal part, I would really start to question what it is that's making me nervous about publishing, what it is that's making me feel uncomfortable about asking people to be interviewees if that's the kind of content that I'm putting out there. And I think that's really helpful to say, what am I worried about? How do I question that to make it go away? All right, I've addressed all the questions about what I'm worried about. How do I get in touch with what I want, what I'm excited about? Because that's really what's going to fire me up. And ultimately, I think you need both. You need that external, but you need to work on yourself internally too.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. But yeah, I know we're probably at least 40 minutes now, if not more. But I'll let you go, and I really appreciate having you on. I hope that in the future, maybe I could have you on again, or
I love it. Maybe you'll make me part of your course, whatever that is.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of I'm hoping that I'll get to a point where my thought was do the interviews, really get to know these people on not looking for anything but more than an interview, and then eventually reach out to them and actually make them a part of something bigger.
Yeah, that something bigger is important. And hell, if Ice-T can make people feel like they're part of something bigger, then you and me with our interviews can do it. And by Ice-T, I don't mean the musician, I mean the drink.
Yeah.
If Honest Tea can make people who drink it feel like they're part of a bigger mission, part of a bigger tribe, then you and I with our content can definitely do it. Because ideas are much more galvanizing than tea.
Yeah. No, it really is amazing what people have been doing with advertising. All right, well, I'll let you go, and I appreciate you taking the time, the extra time as well.
All right, thank you for having me on here.
Yep.
Bye, dude.